Well, hello again, everyone. It's Brian again. Well, kind of. I was just working on my podcast via voice, but I ran into a few technical issues, including a large amount of background noise and a few other setbacks. At this point, my obsessive compulsive disorder started to bother me. And I'm a bit frustrated with my environment as far as voice recording goes, so I may try using my voice for the next podcast. Now, I've been wanting to try writing out what I had in my mind and have a voice actor speak what I've noted, even if it's not as authentic as hearing my nerdy accent. But anyways, here goes. On my previous podcasts, I've gone over a few exciting experiences that occurred at my Radio Shack carrier, the closure of the company, and then the change to becoming a car salesman. And now, Best Buy. Now keep in mind, at the time of this post, my current job is information technology for a medical clinic. And I worked for the retail store for about 5 years. Also, one thing I'd like to add. I can't remember if I mentioned this, but between the Radio Shack and car salesman careers, I assisted my father with his tire business. I wouldn't call it an official position as I only worked when needed and my father would pay me a small amount. I think I've averaged $5 an hour. So yeah, not a whole lot. Though I was earning less than minimum wage and I was eating into my savings, I was living with my parents for support. Now this might be another story I could explain another time. The life of changing tires. Anyways, while I was working at the dealership, some old friends from Radio Shack reached out to me and asked me to join up with them. In fact, the one that contacted me was my former manager at Best Buy. Now just one disclaimer. I'd rather not mention any names regardless if our relationship was good or bad. After the call, I had thoughts about working for this new company, if it would be just like back in the day at Radio Shack. I kept thinking of the one reason that kept me at the dealership, and that was money. Even some of the veteran associates were making $100,000 per year. As I've mentioned in my previous podcast, it's the job I made the most, and I already knew that before I even had an interview. Well, if I even reached that stage, that the income would be hands down a lot less. But as I've reminded myself, money isn't everything, and so I made a visit to the store. At Best Buy, my inner nerd started to awaken within me. Seeing all the computers, TVs, phones, routers, and every other gadget brought a sense of familiarity. I also got to say hi to some of the old employees, which was really heartwarming. Even to my surprise, the district manager for Radio Shack was the store assistant. And after the meet and greet, I decided to pull the trigger. I filled out my job application and messaged the guys that it was completed. I think what convinced me was the environment of both the people and the equipment I needed to work with, the culture. Also keep in mind, the customers were more at ease walking into this retail store than compared to most when they stepped into a dealership. The public relations for this retail store has already been built over the years. Besides, it was another salesman job and it's a thing I've been doing for years. So, I did get an interview with the head manager of the store, and he agreed to take me in. But as I am always like that, I asked for a couple days for an answer. And while I already told myself money wasn't everything, I obviously knew I would take a financial hit. Once I was told of my hourly wage, I figured out that I'd be making just a little less than half of what I made at the dealership. But again, after a couple days of stress, I said to myself, it's all or nothing. I called the store manager, visited the store, and signed the job offer letter. I was now hired at Best Buy. Now a funny story about my notice on quitting the dealership. I was told by the associates there that I needed to quit on the last day. There was no such thing as a 2 weeks notice. Well, not in this particular dealership. Apparently if you gave a notice days ahead, you run the risk of getting accused of any hiccups. I didn't ask exactly what issues would roll over, but I assumed lost inventory, cars in this case, or any damages could fall on me or anyone in the process of leaving the dealership. But yeah, I listened, and no matter how guilty I felt, I gave them a 1-day notice. Don't get me wrong now, all the jobs I've ever had I've always given them a 2 weeks notice, and even with Radio Shack closing down, I stuck with the store until the very last day it shut its doors. But yeah, That's the story of how I moved from being a salesman to, yet again, a salesman. For the retail store, I was assigned to the cellular or mobile department. Which made sense as the lead of the mobile department was in fact my former Radio Shack manager, and I had a solid amount of experience with cell phone contracts. After all, those units were the bread and butter of Radio Shack. And I may just go over the details on my job role, which the title explains most of it. I did have the option to roam around and assist or explore other departments such as home theater or the computer area. Now the one area I was interested in but didn't touch was Geek Squad. I'll need to go over those details later. Since even though I have a degree in information technology, I never touched that area. But again, I'll leave that for another day. I'll cut it off for now and see what other juicy stuff I'll come up with. Anyways, thank you all.